This is Michael Smith from the Real Talk School of Nursing podcast. Nursing school is a struggle for many. Everyone struggles at one point or another, even that seemingly bulletproof student you're thinking about right now. Some people will struggle with tests, some will struggle with clinicals or lab or sims, and some of those students who struggle with none of those things will struggle within the profession. Nursing school is a struggle for some from day one until the day you graduate. It was for me. It might be for you too. But trust me, if I can make it, you can. Just keep working hard. Be truthful to yourself. Be joyful in the hard stuff. On the other end of school is a profession that is amazingly hard. I'm not going to lie to you, especially in the first year. And the rewards, though amazing, are sometimes heartbreaking too. You will have to wade through a lot of muck and mud to get to these amazing little jewels of experiences that make coming to work worth it. Nursing and nursing school isn't just about learning content, about learning the tasks that you have to do. It's about learning to grow through adversity, coming out the other end stronger. You will struggle outside of school too, but I promise you when you make it, it's worth it. So I'll see you on the other end of this crazy nursing school journey. Welcome to the Real Talk School of Nursing podcast, Season 4, Episode 17. I am your good and faithful host, Michael Smith. Today, we are going to talk to Steve, an extraordinary history and economic teacher friend of mine. He has 2 master's degrees, one in history and social studies teacher education. Prior to even the pandemic, he taught both in-person and online hybrid classes and was also on the Khan Academy staff as a content creator and teacher, and has taught courses in personal finances, government, and geography. Thanks for joining me. Let's jump right in. All right, so welcome to part 2. Steve and I had a little bit of an adventurous couple of weeks, more Steve than me, although work has been particularly arduous the last few weeks, but Steve has kind of a story, because the week after you and I recorded part 1, something happened, like something that has to do with current events.
Yeah, so a couple of things happened, actually. The first one was, I can't remember if this had happened when we talked last or if it was right after, is my son's first grade classroom got booted out of school for another week because they had a positive test in that class. So we got to start out first grade distance learning for a week while he was out for his class. And then we got him tested because close contact. And he ended up being negative, but my wife got tested and she had it. So then we went in and I had to get tested with my daughter, who's 1. And she was also positive. So then they had to do it was 10 days of isolation. And because we weren't separate from them in the house, because I don't know how you can stay home with your small children and isolate yourself in the house.
Yeah, no kidding.
But we had to wait for their 10 days. And then because my son and I were close contacts with them, we had to wait 14 days more after their 10 days were up. So we got to spend a few weeks all stuck at home together doing some first grade distance learning. And I was also trying to teach about half the days of every week online that time too. So that's what we've been up to for the last month or so.
So how did it, everybody's okay now, right?
Yeah, my daughter, she had a runny nose for a few days. My wife was a little more wiped out, just really tired and headache, but nothing too serious. And then I assume I had it. I had a few days where I was just really tired, like weirdly tired, but that was the only symptom that I think I had. So
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
I mean, really, thank goodness. I mean, that's been the experience of most of the people that I know who have contracted the virus. Is that for most people, under the age of 70, they handle it. They seem to handle it pretty well. I mean, and I mean, we can't forget that people are sick, regardless of how well you handle it. It still sucks. Like being wiped out for 5 or 6 days if you're a mom and you have 2 little kids that, who want to go in and hug and be close to mom and stuff like that is really hard, I bet.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not I bet, but I know.
But we made it work, and we just kind of switched off. One of us would work at home one day while the other one watched the kids, and then we'd flip-flop and try to do that kind of every other day. And we made it work. But my son...
So did you guys...
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So did you guys just kind of decide within your own household, like, look, there's no way that we're going to be able to keep separate the way that we can't do it like that, so like we're just going to go, we got to do it.
Yeah, as soon as we looked at the guidelines again, I mean, we looked at them a bunch, but you don't really pay that much attention until it actually affects you, right? So when we actually read through the different options, we were just, there's no way we can go 10 days isolating.
Yeah, without talking but within the same household.
No, and the fact that both of us were still trying to work from home, you can't. Then we're switching off the kids. Right. You can't do it. It's not unless everybody just shuts down together. So we just didn't even try. So.
But everybody's okay.
Yep, it worked out all right on that front. So hopefully that means we're safe for a little while anyway.
Yeah, thank goodness. Thank goodness. So. So once you had to go, I mean, because the episode really is about the teacher's perspective on this kind of stuff. Like, how was it trying to go full online from a teacher's perspective, teaching students and being completely online? Like what challenges did you kind of face?
I think the nice thing about our setup was that we have a schedule in place from our hybrid system we've been doing, and so there is a fixed schedule every day. And what we were able to do is I just teach my class at the same time. My first hour starts at 8 a.m. and I'm just on the Google Meet instead of in my classroom. But with our hybrid model, I was already on the Google Meet for 2/3 of my kids on any given day while the rest were in the classroom. So as far as my schedule, I just kept the same schedule, and that was nice. So comparing that to last spring, when we didn't have any set live sessions, we couldn't require students to come in because there was no guarantee that they all had internet access and devices that were going to get them there. This year, our school district bought all the students Chromebooks. I think I said that last time, but that gives everybody the access piece so that we can have a regular schedule on a given day. And for high school kids, and this is totally different for elementary school kids, I know, but me with teaching high school kids, that wasn't too bad, actually. It was manageable. It's hard because you don't see them. You can make everybody turn their cameras on, but with the grid view, I think you still see like 12 of them at a time. And it's hard because you kind of feel like you're talking into the void, because a lot of times they won't give you any indication that they've processed the information. So it
it's like I imagine that when there's a lot of people, if you're looking at that grid view, I mean, it's all small pictures, so you can't really get that visual feedback like you can when you're in a classroom.
Right. It's hard to read the confused looks if there are some. You can do that a lot better in a classroom and be like, this isn't working, let me back up and try it a different way. Whereas online, you don't really know, and they're not going to speak up if you're not making them. And some of them,
and they're also and a lot of them are also muted, so you don't get the like,
Yeah, I don't know
the inaudibles.
I don't know what you're talking about. No student has ever made that sound in my class. They all love history. But I think it is hard because you lose that personal interaction, where you actually see them as another person and they see you as a real person. When I used to teach at the online school all the time, that was one of the hardest parts, is that you never really had a physical entity that you associated with that name on your class roster. Whereas at least with this, even with the hybrid model, you see some of the kids some of the time, and now we're going to lose that piece too. I think it's good that we had a chance to meet each other before we did distance learning, but it's still going to be, it's going to be rough in that regard. You just can't do some of that interpersonal stuff that you do in person. I think that's the hardest part, because I can teach the material, but I have to scale it back. I can't cover the same amount of stuff in an online lesson that I would in person, because I can't give them the same kind of feedback.
See, and I think that's interesting because there's we touched on it a little bit in the last episode, but there was I used my nephew as an example where it seems like the amount, well, it doesn't seem like it. It was just straight up he spent less time doing class stuff than than like, I mean, you spend a normal day of school is 7 or 8 hours or whatever, and like I went over to their house and this was a while back. I think this was even pre-COVID, and I was just like, dude, like, what are you doing? Watching TV? Oh, I'm done with school. Like, bro, it's 9:30. Like, what do you mean you're done with school? And it was like, oh yeah, it was like half an hour, 45 minutes, hour and a half, or whatever, whatever it was. And I can kind of understand that there's some, you have to give time for like group discussion or small group discussion and stuff like that. And then there's, the classroom management pieces that maybe take a little bit of time, but like I have to imagine that the online class, just because of I think there's something lost in there. But do you feel that way? Like there's something lost, and it's not just that personal interaction, but you're also losing a lot of time.
Oh,
even though you're in a, I mean, are you losing time because you're more focused?
You are, and I don't know if it is more. Yeah, it's not more focused. I think the problem is so many of the kids, when they're online, they're so much less focused that's going to cut into your time too, because they're all on the computer. I have no idea what else they're doing. I know they're not solely focused on the class, and that's that right there. Whether we spend the time the same or not, the fact that they have other things pulling on their focus is going to make it less effective. But I think
I use split screen all the time, so I have to assume that other people are doing multiple things as well.
Yes, I just assume that they're doing other things and that their focus is not great. And there's no way to know. That's the problem. Is that, and I mean, I can see when they do the test or something and it goes terribly. It's like, well, we weren't focused. But that's really hard, because you say, like, yeah, you'd think by having the class online, you don't have to deal with behavior management, right? But in a lot of ways, it makes it harder.
Well, because you don't even you can't even see the behaviors.
Right. I don't even know who's playing on their phone or whatever. At least in a classroom, you can see it and be like, "Hey, that needs to go away." But I just don't know.
I can literally see you looking down at your phone, bro.
And it's different, but it's still a problem. And I think time wise too. You lose it in ways you don't even realize. I think is that I start class at 8:00. If it's a normal school day, we have like a minute of announcements at 8:01 that come over the speaker, and then I start class. Whereas I start class at 8:00 on an online meet, and I got to wait till 8:05 because people trickle in and their clocks are all different by a minute or two at their home, and it's you lose time for that. And then when you have transitions between stuff, they just take a little longer because everybody's at home kind of doing their own thing, and you got to wait for some confirmation from everybody that they're there with you and they're ready to move on.
Internet connectivity issues.
Yeah, and that hasn't been too bad the couple weeks I was doing it at home. I actually didn't have any of my students across six classes worth of kids who claimed any internet connection issues. The biggest issue was usually I overslept or something like that was usually the one I got. But you lose time on all those little transitions. It's 5 minutes here, it's 10 minutes there. It takes a little longer than it would in real life, and you just lose that over the course of every class. Um, you're going to cover less, even if you're trying to do the same thing. Whereas what you were talking about with your nephew's situation, that's another piece of it, is that there's simply less stuff being assigned to begin with. Partly because we know it's going to take longer, and partly because when you're handing things out where you're not working with the students, especially if it's new material that they don't have any experience with, you have to aim for kind of I won't say the lowest common denominator, but you have to aim at the bottom end of that distribution, or you're going to have a lot of kids who just don't do the work or don't turn something in, and it's not ideal. But you have to weigh the trade-off of, am I going to try and maintain the same level of academic rigor in a general level class? These aren't I'm not teaching AP level classes that the kids choose to be in. I'm teaching the class that you're required to take to graduate. You have to take world history. You have to take economics. So the more stuff I add, the higher the chance that there's just stuff not getting done, which turns into the kids are behind and you're chasing them down to do that missing work. And again, what's the balance you're willing to strike there? And at what point does it just become ineffective if those kids aren't going to follow a schedule at home? So I don't have a good answer to that as a teacher, and I don't know that many of us do. But it's a very real trade-off that I think you're seeing play out there when you're like, why does my student only have 2 hours of work to do from a 6-hour school day? It might have to do with that,
but I think that translates directly. So if I'm bringing it back from just like a high schooler's perspective into like nursing school or prereqs or those kinds of things, you as a student might be getting a lot less instruction. I mean, where in the middle of a summer session, for example, I had like 4-hour blocks of instruction. I actually really liked that. But the in a normal a normal prereq class, it was a normal hour and a half or whatever it was. And it was pretty dense. I mean, these are science classes, so I mean, it's pretty, it's a dense class. And if I'm doing the online stuff, I feel like maybe there's a bit more, there's a bit less. Well, you're saying that there is a bit less instruction that happens, and that's going to require students to be a little bit more responsible for their own learning. Or is that what you are saying?
I think it's a part of it, definitely. The kids have to take on a little more responsibility. They have to manage their time. They have to figure out, did I actually understand this or not? Because again, you don't have that kind of instant feedback from the classroom. And I try to recreate that as much as I can in an online setting. But yeah, it does boil down to, in large part, are they taking that responsibility? Are they managing their learning and time? And the reality is, high school kids, by and large, can't do that very well. Or you say, if you're in nursing school, if you're an adult student, that sense of, I chose to do this, that sense of commitment to your program, this higher level of conscientiousness, of responsibility, I think, for most adult students, that the high school kids,
I would say a higher preponderancy. I wouldn't say a high preponderancy.
Oh yeah, and I won't. There
was definitely class sessions where I'm just like, oh, I can't even think today.
For sure, and I would hope that happens less with a kind of self-selected group of adult students than with the whole population of high school kids.
Yeah, for sure.
But it is, and it's something we talk about a lot in education. We like to say we want to have self-sufficient learners who can manage their own learning and all of that. But I don't think we are honest in addressing how insanely difficult that is to do, and how hard that is to instill in students. Because it's a nice sounding goal. It would be great if we could just kind of wave our wands and say, yep, now you can be a self-directed learner. But that's not something that just happens, and it's not something that I think for most people is a natural inclination. So that's something that you're always battling against, and I feel like distance learning just makes that such a bigger issue than it is when they're actually coming to the classroom.
Well, let's take a quick break there, and then when we come back, let's get a little bit into like classroom management tips for helping students stay organized and things like that. Patience. What is that? Who even has time for that? PIE is P-I-E. Patience in everything. It's a simple yet difficult, yet powerful thing to learn. Think about the last time you were impatient. What came of it? How patient am I with others? How patient am I with myself? How patient and kind am I with the trials and unexpected turns in life? Am I patient and fully aware of the blessings of each day? I've been given a gift, be it fruit or life. It's up to me to choose how to use it. This is a book of short essays on life through something as simple as pie. Here's Coletta reading Pieology 101.
Pieology 101, the synchronicity of pie in life. How awesome to ponder how our Creator has put our individual ingredients so carefully together. Yet we get to choose our finishing touches and the temperature settings of the day. Sometimes we're hot, sometimes we're not. Every day is spent forming our own creation of self. Some days we also form a pie. Our ingredients of the day can be mixed up, nutty and complicated, or just sweetly simple. Fruits grown out of even the best soil and conditions may become bruised, but even imperfect fruit can become a pie to savor. Life, as imperfect as it may be, has a multitude of savory and sweet bites in each new day. Pie in life, filled to the brim with the fillings of our choice, oozing and bubbling over, and just so beautifully messy. Pie in life, any pie or day can end in failure and be perfected on the next. Pie in life, presented in pieces and are just what is left over, or sometimes well presented, well-rounded as a whole. Pie in life are made up of a beautiful variety of spices and different tastes. Pie in life, overworking can make it too tough. Pie in life, tender care will always produce a perfect foundation. Pie in life, dig in while it's fresh. Share that creation.
Get your copy of The Pie Letters by Coletta Hewitt in softcover or ebook from thepieletters.com. That's thepieletters.com, and buy your copy in softcover or ebook from thepieletters.com, or you can go to Amazon. Love you all. God bless.
You're listening to the Real Talk School of Nursing podcast.
Okay, so welcome back. So in this segment, let's talk about classroom management tips and things like that, and then helping students stay organized and try to stay on task. Bringing this back to, again, from a teacher's perspective, things that you're seeing students do that are negatively impacting their ability to stay organized and self-motivated while in the classroom. So kind of take it away if you want.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. Let's see.
That's okay. We have 15, 20 minutes, whatever.
Right. So things that they do that make it harder for them. Maybe we'll start with that.
Okay.
So I think the first one honestly goes back to the focus. And I always tell my students all the time, this is regardless of what situation we're in, tell them you remember what you think about, and you think about what you're focused on. And as soon as you start focusing on something else, you're not thinking about your classwork. You're not thinking about whatever it is we're going over. You're thinking about what's on your Snapchat. You're thinking about what your friend just texted you. You're thinking about whatever app the kids are playing this week. And that's something that's really hard to control as a teacher, because even if they don't have something in front of them to distract them, your focus can come and go real quickly, right? We've all drifted off, as you mentioned. And I think the key thing is, can you get rid of those distractions? Because as soon as you're not focusing, it doesn't really matter what I do as a teacher. And if you can notice that about yourself and bring yourself back, you're not going to miss so much. But if you're just in a constant state of thinking about everything else you'd rather be doing, I don't know what else to do at that point, because I can give you the material, but if you don't think about it, it doesn't do anything for you. So that's not. Yeah,
I think so. Like, it sounds very much like the advice that I've given over and over again. People are probably sick of hearing it, but like, I have a dedicated study space, or I had a dedicated study space within, and it doesn't have to be an enclosed room. It doesn't have to be an office. It can just be a desk. It's like, okay, when I'm sitting at this desk, family, you cannot bother me. Like, you can't, don't come up to me and ask me questions about this, that, or the other thing. This is dedicated time. And my email is off. That was always a big distractor for me, because I would look up and I say, oh, it's got the little hashtag, or not hashtags, parentheses with a 1, or like, oh, I better check my email, can't possibly miss that, in this 45-minute or an hour-long class or whatever it was. Phone, the big thing was the phone's got to be out of the room. The phone has to be out of the room, like not on the desk, not flipped over, not on silent. It literally has to be like out of the room, so you can't, and on silent, so you can't like hear it buzzing from the other room, when it goes off and your friends are all making Snapchats and stuff like that. Like that's because it's so easy when you just get distracted to just reach over and just check things and totally lose focus. I mean, that was a huge thing for me.
And that's like I said, that's the part that's hard enough to control when you're in a classroom, but when they're at home, just forget about it. As a teacher, I don't know how to do that. So I think as much as they're not going to do it. The kids who are able to do it are probably doing that already, and it's not very many. And the kids who aren't able to do that, I think the best advice I can give you is, if it's you, I don't think there are any high school students listening to this, but maybe. But if you're a parent of a high school student, I think as much as you can create that space for them, which might be hard if you're going to work and they're at home, but where they can't have the phone and they can't do other things. And I mean, at the very least, just kind of check in at the end of the day and say, what did you get done today? Hey, can I look at that?
Right.
With our first grader, he gets his folder home and I look at what he did today, and I can kind of talk through it, and we spend 5-10 minutes and say, oh, what's this about? What did you learn? And just doing that with your high school kids too. What did you accomplish today? What did you learn? Tell me something. But if you're a student, I mean, to bring that lesson home, if you're a student, so, again, if we're in a prereq situation where maybe you are just 1 year out of high school, and you're still you're still learning how to, responsibly manage your time and responsibly manage your schoolwork and stuff like that. Like, that is a major thing. Like, you have to be able to do, say to yourself, okay, this is no joke. This is something that I have to take seriously, because, I mean, maybe it was the same for you when you got to school, but once I started taking prereqs for nursing school, my focus changed, because I was actually paying for it versus, being on a loan that parents had co-signed, or that you didn't
whatever
even
the deal
fully
was.
Understand how it worked at the time. And,
I had no idea. It was like, oh, okay, a $20,000 loan, and sign it like it's no big deal, and and then versus, oh my gosh, okay, this class is $785, which is probably $2,000 in today's dollars, but like $750, and that's, I have to pay for that. I got to write out a check for that, and that really hurt, and that really focused me. But if you're in prereqs, if you're a prereq student, or you're out of high school and trying to get through nursing school and stuff like that, I like these are, listen to this, because Steve is telling you that this is something that his high school students struggle with, and I'm telling you that that's something that I struggled with even as an adult learner, 15 15 years after I graduated college, and I know the value of $1, and I know how much money it's costing me to be distracted by my phone. Like, it's a difficult thing to overcome. So, create that dedicated space, get the phone out of the room, turn off your email, get rid of every distraction you can possibly control. You're not going to be able to control everything, but do the best that you can with it within the confines of your control. Because listen, he's telling you exactly what I've been telling you guys for forever. It's like, create the dedicated space, get rid of that phone while you're trying to study. Stay off the internet, stay off YouTube and the Facebook videos and Instagram videos and all the stuff that I absolutely love getting distracted by.
So just set up this is my time to just be distracted and do kind of fun but shallow things, right? And have that time too. And if you know you have that time set aside, maybe that helps. I don't know how helpful that is for everybody, but like you said, if you can control it, you have to do that, because your good intentions to not look at your phone that's on your desk are not going to hold up for the course of a 50-minute class. I promise you they won't.
For sure.
No matter how well-intentioned you are not to look, you're going to get distracted. And to point it out, so I do this, I oftentimes I haven't been able to now because of the online, but in previous years, I would always, on the first day of class, do a little activity with my students to try and illustrate why they can't multitask, which is essentially what we're talking about, right? Is people are trying to multitask because this class isn't the most exciting thing in the world, and I'll just kind of half pay attention. I'll get the important parts. That's what we tell ourselves. You don't, because your brain can't multitask. You've probably talked about this many times with studying, right? Your brain doesn't multitask. It just switches its focus back and forth really quickly. And so the activity I would do, which I totally stole from some teacher online, and I'm ashamed to say I can't remember who it was, but so I can't credit them. But the activity was, I have them sit down with a partner. They have a piece of notebook paper, and down the left-hand side on each line, they write the numbers 1 through 20 in order. So one number per line on the left-hand side. Then I have them go to the far right edge of the paper, and then on those same lines, they write, "I am a great multitasker," 1 letter per line. And there are 20 letters, that's why it's 20 numbers on the other side. And I have them time, how long does it take you to write 1 through 20, and then go over to the right and write, "I am a great multitasker." When you hit that R, have your partner stop the clock. And they do it, and it takes them anywhere from like 15 to 40 seconds, depending on how quickly they write. And I write that down. And then we do a new version where you still do 1 through 20 on the left. You do "I am a great multitasker" on the right. And the second time through, you have to write the 1, then you have to come across and write the "I" on the right. Then you have to come across and write the 2, then come back over and write the "A," and then back and forth all the way down. And I have them time that. And it's a disaster, and a lot of them miss letters and miss numbers. They've misspelled things just by doing the same 2 tasks back and forth. And it takes them way longer, and they usually make some mistakes along the way. And I use that to show them, like, that's your brain multitasking. Even if you got it all right, which some of them do, but not all of them, it took them at least twice as long to do it. And I point out, yeah, if you give your focus, even if you just focus on one task at a time, you're going to get all the tasks done faster. And you're definitely going to get them done better if you're focused on. So I don't know how well that sinks into all of them, but I usually make them do a little reflection on, like, what does this tell you about multitasking? And it's something I've tried to make it a little more concrete. And if you're listening and you want to try it, it takes like 2 minutes. So you can do it and see for yourself. I'm not making this up. I have literally never had a student go faster doing the back and forth. It's just not. It's just not possible. And like I said, the mistakes come in a lot more. So I would say that's the biggest thing. I can't really control that as a teacher, but I can try to remind them and make that a little more obvious to them.
Okay. So what about, one of the things that I talk about is like trying to keep a routine in that if you are doing like online school which is what a lot of nursing schools are doing for at least their lecture portion. They're still doing online schools, and there are still a lot of a lot of our kids are doing at least hybrid. Some of them are going all online depending on what area you're in. I try to promote keeping a routine, and whether that's dedicating the same number of hours that you spend in class to the lecture material before you get distracted, or before you not get distracted, but before you jump into individual studying and focusing on particular things within the lecture material, but actually spending the same amount of time, getting up at the same, I tell people, get up at your normal time, go and brush your teeth, get out of your pajamas, stay in some kind of routine. Is that something that do you think that's going to help students stay organized, stuff like that?
I would think it's helpful for most people. Yes. I think it goes back to that idea of, the focus piece, and there are a few people who can control themselves and focus and do that, but for the vast majority of us, as much as we can create external things that force us to follow that and focus, I think that helps. So with the kids, in our situation where I'm teaching, they still, even though we're moving to distance, they still have to follow their class schedule, and didn't have to do that last spring. And I think that in and of itself is going to make a huge difference in terms of keeping kids on track, in that they have to log into class for first hour at 8:00. And in the spring, it was just, here's some work, get it done by the end of the week on whatever schedule you want. So we're, at least in our setting, it is forcing that schedule on kids. And I, having tried it out teaching from home here for the last few weeks, it did seem like I was getting more kids who were staying on track, more kids who were getting the material than what I had last spring.
Sure.
It's a small sample so far. We'll see how it plays out long term. But the school is sort of creating that structure in the sense of you're still following your day-to-day schedule. So that would be helpful. And I know lots of people don't have that option. So as you said, if I can devote, I'm going to get up and from 8 to 10 is my school time or whatever it is, I'm going to turn off the phone. It's going to be away. I'm not going to turn on my TV. I think that is helpful. And
where did you see when students are working online, what happened when students fell off schedule? Were they able to keep?
Never.
Once they did they ever catch back up?
Not really. And this was something when I worked at the online school for years that we always had to deal with, was kids would fall off schedule, and then it would always be like, oh, but you have time to catch up because it's not due till the end of the semester. And that's sort of what's happening, I think, in a lot of schools now, is that there aren't really a lot of hard due dates because everybody's worried kids get behind and then they're going to fail and so on. And I get why people are worried about that because it happens. And it's not great, though, as a message, because too many kids, they fall behind and then they're like, well, it's not really due yet. I have till the end of the semester, without calculating that, but you're also getting new assignments every day that you're not getting done, and you fall back. So it's very rare that I see it. And then what you typically will see from kids who want to catch up is that at some point they'll decide, I got to get caught up. And they just plow through 30 assignments in 2 days. And they're not learning anything. Yeah, they get it done, but you're not learning anything when you go through that much material that fast. So
sure.
I would say, yes, falling off schedule is not something that most students easily recover from. And I think one of the ways I try to deal with that is, if you have your units kind of broken up, you can say, you know what, you didn't finish that unit. And in history, we can do this and say, you know what, just that's done. It's gone. Do not get hung up on it because you're just going to be perpetually behind. Let's just start on the next one. Now, in other subjects, that doesn't work, right? If it's a sequential thing that builds on the last unit, that doesn't work. But I think you have to kind of cut your losses sometimes as a student and say, is it really worth it to spend this time and just be behind for the next 4 weeks, or do I just need to jump back in where we are and work forward? And again, it'll depend on the subject in the class.
And I wonder for like in a more science-based subject, if it's, I mean, you do kind of build to a certain extent, but like I can remember in my second term of nursing school, I got stuck in traffic, and I mean, and I drove like an hour and a half or so, depending on traffic, sometimes up to 2 hours, where and I got stuck in traffic. Like I was updating the instructors the whole time, like taking pictures of this like ridiculous line of traffic, and it was like, there's no way around this. I got to drive across, 2 major metropolitan areas in order to get to the school. And, they're like, sorry, you can't do it. So at that point, it was like, okay, so do I just continue to study to make sure I have this, or do I just go, okay, the points are gone. Like, no use crying over spilt milk, and just focus on what the next thing is. And for a small thing like a quiz, even though sometimes a five points can make a huge difference in your grade, like I still think there's like the ability to go, okay, that part's gone. Let's just let's not compound the problem by doing worse in the next subject because I missed the points in the last subject, missing points in this next subject because I'm trying to make up for the lost learning. Is it better to just go, okay, it's gone, let's make sure that I do well in this next segment in order to make sure that I make up for the time that I lost?
Right. And it's hard.
Is that fair?
Yeah, it's hard for people to see that big picture, I think, because they get hung up, and especially the kids, because the high school kids are not always, I say almost never, I should say, looking at this as I didn't learn that thing. They literally look at it as, I missed 10 points. I'm going to get a B- instead of a B now. And that consumes them a lot of times, because they look at the score, and the score is the be-all, end-all, and it's really, what does that score represent is what we want them to care about. But again, it takes a lot of time to get that mindset shift. So like you said, if you can step back and look at it and recognize, like, okay, I missed that. I could go back, but it's going to put me behind, or I can just move on. A lot of times it makes more sense to just move on. And talk in any situation, talk to the teacher and just confirm, like, is that going to drastically change my grade? Typically the answer will be no. And you can kind of make that decision with the teacher, whether that's your high school teacher or your kid's teacher or your professor, whatever it is. I think most of the time from the teacher side, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I try to be flexible and understanding about that stuff, and encourage them to say, like, hey, I missed this, or even just like, hey, I screwed up and I blew this off. Just to acknowledge that and have a conversation about moving forward. I think that's valuable especially for kids.
Do you think it would be so, like, if you're a parent, or again, if you're a nursing student, whether in prereqs or whether you're in nursing school, like, picking out a day, like, because you have, well, today is your grading day and whatever else, and you kind of check in with students, and it's like your checkup day, or is that what you call it, a checkup day?
Yeah, like check in,
whatever,
catch up,
like,
whatever they need to do.
Okay, so like if I'm in nursing school, and should I pick out a day where I'm just like, okay, every week on this day I built rapport with this one instructor, check up with them and just kind of check in and be like, okay, what am I missing, or this is my day to ask questions based on the week thus far, or something like that, just to make sure that you're staying engaged with instructors. Like, is that,
I would think that's a good strategy if it works for your schedule and their schedule to have something like that. Just for no other reason than just it creates that sense of accountability. If you know you have a meeting at some point where you have to explain what you've accomplished this week, I feel like that does create a little more accountability for people. Just to be like, I don't know, just when you ask the kids, what did you do at school today? It's not necessarily, any particular thing. It's really more.
It gets
creates. But it creates a sense of like, oh, I know they're going to ask me at the end of the day. You know, somebody's going to ask, what did you do today? And if my answer is, I sat around in my pajamas and ate ice cream and watched Netflix, most people, I think, would feel a sense of like embarrassment knowing that they're going to have to explain themselves to somebody. Not everybody, but I think most people, knowing at some point you're going to have to explain and justify what you've accomplished, like it pushes you a little bit more. Whereas if you're like, well, I'm never going to talk to that teacher in person, I'm just going to hide out online, and you know, you have less of a sense of obligation or duty to it. And again, what we want people to do is get to the point where they can manage that themselves and they feel obligated to themselves to be productive. But again, for most of us, having that external thing is necessary in many cases. So definitely.
So what about studying? What about stuff that you know? How do students stay organized with studying, and like what's a good effective way to studying when you're doing the online stuff?
It kind of depends on how your classes are broken up. But I think a good rule is you want to probably spend about 10 to 15 minutes a day on a particular thing, rather than cram. And I can't remember if we talked about this last time or not, but what students like to do is they'll wait till the night before the test, and then they will cram for a few hours.
I've never done it.
Right? No, I've heard people do it, but you know, I've never seen.
I've heard other people do that. Never me. None of my friends either.
No, and it's it goes back to that idea I mentioned earlier that people don't really know how to manage their time and learning very well. And part of that is we never really teach them how to do that in a school system. And you know, a lot a lot of times.
But by God, I know how to square dance.
Yeah, I did that. Thank that
goodness.
too. It was one of my best units in gym class, actually. Which yeah. So what happens? Do they call it a square dance? Is the square referring to the actual pattern that you dance in, or is the square a description of what you become by enjoying that?
Yes.
So what the students will do, and what basically most people do because they don't really know how to study, they will cram the night before the test, and they'll probably spend a few hours. They'll probably stay up too late doing it too, and lose out on sleep, which isn't really good for your performance.
Not good. Those of you who are getting ready to take the NCLEX, do not stay up late the night prior.
No, it messes with your cognition and your memory. It's not good. But I think one of the problems is a lot of teachers, we kind of inadvertently encourage this poor study behavior, because we'll give the kids the study guide or something and have a review day the day before the test.
The day prior.
And it's just so ingrained in how we structure our things that I think we collectively as teachers kind of contribute to these bad study habits in the way we plan it out. So what you really should do is, if you want to know well in advance what you're going to get tested on, and you want to break that up and do a little bit of practice every night. And you really want to focus. This is the other part that students really struggle with, even when they start to get that you want to break up the studying piece. What do you want to study in that short time? Well, you want to focus on the things you don't know very well. And a lot of times students will go back and do the things that they already are comfortable with. And you have to find a way to determine which things am I not good at, and do a little bit of that every day if you want to make progress, right? If you're fine with saying, well, I knew like half of that going in, and I learned a few more pieces with my poor study habits, and I got a D and passed. Okay, I guess that's an option. But if you really want to know the stuff, you have to focus on what am I doing poorly on, and I'm going to spend, even if it's just 10 minutes a day on the stuff I'm not good at, that's going to be a huge gain for your effort, right? If you want to think, I'm going to invest, where can I invest the time and effort for the biggest return? Just spend a few minutes on the stuff you're not good at yet every day, and don't spend time rereading sections that you already know.
So, I've maybe you can get a little bit different perspective on this than I can. Well, here, hold on. let's back up a little bit. Let's take a quick break. So we've been going for about 15 or 20 minutes now. So let's break, and then let's come back to a couple of different study tips, because you hit on something about, like, reading chapters that you already know and stuff like that. And I kind of want to get into like how to effectively use a textbook, because that's another thing that I don't think gets taught. Like I was in my last year of nursing school. I think their very first week of my last year of nursing school, and one of my instructors, they were like, "Well, do you know how to read a textbook?" And I'm like, well, I thought I did. So what can you teach me? So let's come back and let's talk about effective ways to use the materials or the resources that we have, whether it's online or whether we're in person. So let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about that.
Alrighty.
Our sponsor for this segment is Bergman Grossman's Day-Old Countryside Open Air Fish Market. We're all strapped for cash, so why spend your hard-earned money on fresh fish when you can spend less money on a slightly older fish? Let's be honest. Is a day-old fish sitting in the sun in the geometric center of the United States really that much different from fresh fish that's sold at oceanside markets? Some of the fish might be slightly older than a day, but that just means it's discounted even more. Cook it over a campfire, and you'll never be able to tell the difference between necrosis and good old campfire char. So go down to Birchman & Grossman's Day-Old Countryside Open Air Fish Market, right across from the Sunset Motel and RV Park in Belle Fourche. Mention the Real Talk School of Nursing podcast for a free basket of raw crustaceans. Take them fresh or ship them anywhere in the lower 48 via the U.S. Postal Service for their $8 special 6-day guaranteed delivery service. So stop down at Birchman Grossman's Day-Old Countryside Open Air Fish Markets in downtown Belle Fourche, or stop by for the grand opening of their second location, Birchman Grossman's 2-day-old Countryside Open Air Fish Market, just off Highway 85 in Jolly Dump. Pasture parking and porta-johns are available for all paying customers. BYOTP, or bring your own toilet paper. Birchman Grossman's Day-Old Countryside Open Air Fish Market. If you think the name is a mouthful, wait till you try the fish. Okay, well, welcome back. So let's talk about some, wise utilization of resources, and let's find out if I am completely full of crap when it comes to like how to read a textbook and things like that. So Steve, how would you teach your students how to read a textbook?
So I should clarify first. So it depends on the class here, because like when I teach a world history class, I very often am not relying on a single textbook for that.
Okay.
Whereas
nursing students often have many books, that we have to go through, for each class. So
if we have kind of the textbooks are really convenient as sort of a core narrative that you can follow along and sort of build and go off in different tangents from. In economics, much more common, I'm sure, in science subjects, not having taught them, but I think they're probably more likely to rely on a textbook as well. So what I do when we do look at the textbooks is really emphasize how they organize the information in a way that if you pick up even a book that's like a kind of an academic book, but not a textbook, right? That's going to be organized in a somewhat different way than a textbook is. The textbook is trying to help you. I think that's the best way to think about it as a student. They're going to give you the chapter headings, and then they're going to have the subheadings, and they're going to break those down into a couple paragraphs that have a slightly smaller heading. So the biggest thing to look at is kind of what is the structure of that knowledge in that chapter. And again, they give you this by just looking at the headings. You could create a pretty simple outline for yourself. But the chapter title is the big thing, and then the smaller points, and then the smaller points underneath them. So anybody who's ever written an outline for prepping a paper or whatever, the textbook is just an expanded outline, right? They include all the text underneath each heading. So I think in a simple
but what
view,
do you do?
Sorry.
Sorry.
No, go.
No, so the way that I was taught to read a textbook is to, like, if it has a chapter summary at the very, it's usually at the end of the chapter, you go and read that. So you kind of get a bird's eye view of the whole chapter, and then you go through and you go to like all the maybe not in a world history, but in a more technical book where it has like breakaways, little boxes and graphics. Graphics are the next thing you're supposed to look at, and it's like, okay, well, for example, in my maternity OB book, like the pictures of the different head positions a baby can be in or an infant can be in the birth canal, like if I'm just reading the text of that, there's no friggin' way I'm going to remember that. But because I'm a human being and we're visually based beings, it's easier for me to understand what each position is if there's a picture, and so I go and look at those. And then there's the boxes, that have like little narratives and stories and case studies or something like that. And so you're breaking it up into smaller pieces, and I think that's kind of what you're talking about, is like if you look at it from an organizational standpoint, don't read it like a novel because you're going to fall asleep before you get to the second paragraph. But if you understand that you're taking each snippet, into smaller bite-sized pieces, it's easier to understand the whole.
Right. And what I would do with that when I make the reference to the outline is that, you have this outline of kind of the key points that at least the textbook author has decided are the important things to know. Right. Okay. And that may or may not be correct depending on what you need to do with them. Some textbooks are better than others, but generally speaking, if you just kind of use all those headings and subheadings, they're going to tell you here are the kind of big things you need to know. And okay. What I would recommend, especially if you're kind of self studying that and the teacher's not really walking you through any of that, or because you're online and you just don't have that opportunity, I would treat the outline as sort of as your study guide, and what you can do is sort of go through and quiz yourself. Right. So one of the most effective ways you can study is to do what's called retrieval practice and pull that out of your memory. What do you know? So starting with, some of that stuff might be information you already know, right? Can you go through and identify that? And if you have that sort of high level outline of just the key ideas, the best way to do that and say, what do I know, is to take out a piece of paper and write down, what do I know about this topic? And,
I see. Okay. So like if I went to a whiteboard, who knew that I was going to bring up whiteboards about talking about studying? Never happened on my show before. But you'd go like, if you understand what the outline is, you could write out that outline and then be like, okay, well, I remember this because this fits into this heading and stuff like that. Is that what you mean, where you're just kind of writing down everything that you remember?
Yeah, exactly. And it is. You just kind of, here's a topic, write down everything you can remember, and that will give you at least a starting point for your studying to say, like, okay, I know a lot about topic A, I know a lot about topic B, I feel comfortable with it. And it is important that you write it out from memory, right? It's got to be what's in your head. You can't go look at the notes, because then it doesn't tell you what you know and remember, right? And that's the hard part for a lot of people is, but then it exposes what I don't know very well, and that makes me feel bad. But that's the whole point, is that there's not supposed to be any stakes attached at this point. It's just to tell you, honestly, what do I know and what don't I know? And when you notice there are sections where you have a lot of gaps, or you're like, I don't know anything about that, that's a good sign for where should I focus my efforts.
Sure.
And if you don't
like that.
have...
That's great.
Yeah, if you don't have a structure in place or whatever is going on that tells you, here's your study guide, you can create your own from a textbook chapter using those headings, and oftentimes they'll bold key terms in there, right? And like you said, so there might be some procedures that are set off to the side that they highlight in a separate box. You probably want to know those things. So what's helpful about the textbook is, yes, their structure kind of gives you some pretty big clues on what the important ideas are. And then from that, you can sort of create a study guide for yourself and say, do I know those key ideas?
Okay.
And if you have a teacher who knows about the value of doing the retrieval practice and they create their class in a way that lays that out for you, then you're lucky. But a lot of times, like I said, we have this bad habit of handing out the study guide the day before the test, which isn't that helpful. But
unless you've been doing the outline the whole time,
right.
then you can go, okay, well,
right.
I've set it up like this. What are the areas that maybe they're emphasizing more than I did in my own self-study?
For sure.
You're making small adjustments. You're making small adjustments, and then instead of big sweeping ones.
Because you don't want to be making big adjustments right before the test. So I would encourage anybody who's using any of those readings to do that. Make it into an outline that you can sort of use as a study guide, as a checklist, and quiz yourself on it. So when I said earlier, spend maybe 10 to 15 minutes a day just kind of reviewing, studying the particular topics, that's how you know which things to spend that time on. I'm gonna remember, guys, remember, everybody, that when he says 15 to 20 minutes a day, remember that this is from a high school perspective, and they're talking about, economics and world history and stuff like that. I think the time requirements, especially if you're in nursing school, if you're in prereqs, you should probably be doing, I would think, probably 30 to 45 minutes. And if you're in nursing school, you should be doing a solid hour of this every day. Right. And
the time stamps that you need to be spending in nursing school to be successful is far and above
right,
probably what you need to do for the just. And I'm not downplaying your teaching, and I'm not downplaying the rigor of high school, but the level of knowledge that you need to know, not just to get through nursing school, but in order for a professional degree like nursing, are on a little bit different scale. So I just like.
For sure. And when I say,
there we go.
I should, yes, I should clarify, when I say like 10 to 15 minutes on something, I mean on a very specific piece of knowledge or concept.
Okay.
So yeah, I would definitely, if you want to be really successful, even in high school, yes, you need to study for more than 10 to 15 minutes. I should clarify that. Yeah, like 10 to 15 minutes on a very specific concept. Because what happens is if you're spending more than that on the same idea, the same concept, and you're still not like making progress and feeling comfortable with it, that's probably a sign that you're not understanding it at a more basic level. But yeah, I would think like 10 to 15 minutes studying, if I'm doing a unit on China, that they're studying the map of China's geography, and then maybe they spend 10 to 15 minutes studying the different political systems that the different empires used, or something like that, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So it's like 10 to 15 per topic.
Okay.
And that's where I say, if you don't feel like you're making progress within that kind of 10-minute window, that's probably a sign that you need to go back a step and make sure you actually got it in the first place.
Okay. So like in a translation, if I'm bringing it to like a nursing subject, I'm not doing the endocrine system in 10 or 15 minutes. I'm doing, the function of the kidney, just the kidney, or the pituitary gland, or one thing that I'm spending 15 minutes on.
But you might spend an hour,
an entire system.
You might spend an hour on the endocrine system, but break that into smaller pieces and specific pieces of knowledge that you can work on.
Okay.
Yeah, and then once you have the pieces down, then you work on building the connections between them, right?
Nice.
So then you create that system. It's in psychology we'd call it schema, right? In your mind, it's the interconnections that create that system as a whole in your brain. But again, you have to build into it. You can't just look at, here's the schema, I'll memorize the schema. It's a hard-won process that you have to go through and learn the pieces and learn how they fit together.
Sure. Well, let me ask you something else. So one of the mistakes that I made probably up until my last full semester, and it always seems like it's the last semester that you figure things out and we're like, oh yeah, maybe I should have done this like 3 years ago. The mistake that I made is when I'm going through my textbooks or when I'm sitting and studying from the lectures that we had, because we were very lecture based and very lecture heavy, was that, I picked up on things and I go, because I had some experience in the medical field, I could say, okay, I've seen this. This seems very important. This seems very important to my professional career. This is something that is important and practical to know. And what I discovered was that practicality has absolutely nothing to do with teachers writing tests, and that anything that's in the textbook is fair game for questions. I can remember one question, for example, about METs or metabolic equivalencies or something like that, and it was on one page. It was one sentence within this paragraph, and didn't even show up in the glossary of the book. And it was like, where did this come from? And I've never heard anybody talk about it. Nobody knows what it is. If I ask another nurse about what or MEQ or METs or whatever it is, I can't remember what it is, but like, it's not something that's practical to know, but it was something that was on a test, and that was something that, I could have had an easy point if I had just paid attention to the one bolded word that was in the textbook. So the question is that when you're writing a test, are you in fact just trying to grab questions from anywhere you can gain something, or from your perspective as a, and again, the subject matter is a little bit different, so you might approach questions differently, but do you think that textbooks or information from textbooks is kind of fair game?
I would say my personal reaction to that is that's not a good test question. If it's really pedantic.
I agree, but that's nursing school.
Yeah, so it's.
I feel like that's nursing school.
Yeah, and so it's hard to. I think it's hard to have any general advice for that, because I feel like some of that's going to probably be the idiosyncrasies of a given professor, and maybe they just like to have something where they can be like, oh, well, nobody's going to get a perfect score on my test, because that's a thing. That's a thing some teachers are into. I mean, my personal take on it is the test needs to be a valid measurement of what you really care about the students knowing. And that's where I think your point on what's practical, what are the things that you spend the most time on, and to put it in a nursing context, right? There are probably a handful of things that eat up 70 to 80% of your time as a nurse, right? A handful of procedures or things that you do. Like those are the core things that you need to get down well, because that's a huge chunk of your job. And then you can probably identify the things that you do much more often and the things that only come up every once in a while.
Right.
You need to know them.
And it's different for and if you're listening, it's different for every department that you're in. So the 10 things that I do, and the 10 medications that I know, those are different from the 10 things that an ICU nurse does, the 10 or 15 medications that an ICU nurse knows. So it's different for every job. So
yeah, so I think
that's another hump.
Yeah, and that's something you have to figure out when you actually get into the job too. And so I think the if I can make it a more general piece of advice, I think yes, it's good to build a very broad base, especially when you're still in the school stages, to build a broad base of knowledge. Ideally, yes, the teacher, the professor, whoever it is going to give you some sort of sense of what should be important. And I would think most of them generally do, right?
because I'm not. I mean, no matter what, I get to the end of the class, and I'm not going to be an expert by any means.
No.
But I hope, as Mark Klimek would say, that I'm ready to be a novice generalist.
Yes,
is the term that he uses, and I really like that.
That's how I think about it too. When I teach, when I teach my economics class, I do not get into all the very mathy parts of doing the linear algebra to do equations for supply and demand and that. I just want them to know what the graphs look like and understand how the things shift around and what the law of supply and demand say. So to put that in my context, they're ready to be a novice generalist. They can see an article about a shortage of something and they understand at a basic level why that's happening, right? But they're not going to go out
and why prices might go up when there's a supply that's down.
Yep, and why do stores put things on sale and all of those things. That's what I care about them knowing. And so I think to put it in, maybe this is totally off base because I have no background in medicine. Is to say you understand the kind of broad families of medications, right? And you understand generally what they're used for, what their effects are, what are the potential side effects of amphetamines and of opioids and all that stuff, right?
No, actually that is actually incredibly insightful on your part. How people should be, from my perspective, studying for pharmacology, for example, is that you learn drug families, and most of the time drug families have a naming convention. So beta blockers all end with OLOL, and there's naming conventions. So if you see a medication that's metoprolol, well, okay, that's a beta blocker that's a cardiac, and then you can go, okay. But if you see what the mistake that a lot of people make is in pharmacology, which is we're kind of drilling down a little bit, but people will see a medication as well, I don't know that specific medication. It's Stevolol. And it's I don't know what Stevolol does. Oh my gosh, it's okay, it's an LOL. Or OLOL, it's a beta blocker. It does the same thing that every other beta blocker does.
Right.
Good. You're good. You're good.
That's what I think I would frame it as when you talk about what's the practical knowledge, right? Knowing that is going to give you a much broader foundation than if you learned about 3 specific medications, right?
Right.
And if I put it in world history, right? One of the things I try to think about in a world history class, which obviously the potential content is way too big to actually fit in one class. You have to cut, the vast majority of everything that happened and pick a few things. And so I look at it and think about okay, I want students to understand how culture works. I want students to understand what an empire is. I want students to understand the difference between autocracy and democracy and so on in different forms. Now, what specific examples I use to teach that might be totally different than what Mr. Magoo down the hall is doing. But at the end of the semester, if we know our students are going to understand kind of on a substantive level what empires are and stuff, that's a lot more powerful. That's a lot broader and more valuable. It's still, I would say, it's still a piece of knowledge, right, that you have to learn and acquire and practice. But it's going to be more far-reaching, and you can hang some specific examples you learned on there and hopefully add to that over time when you encounter them, as opposed to if I just teach them this super detailed, let's talk about the economic reforms of the Emperor Diocletian when he creates the Roman Tetrarchy. We could go really in-depth into that, but the broader application of that, I guess, is much more limited than if I explain to them how the Roman Empire worked in a more general sense, because they can apply that to other empires. I don't know if that's probably not a great example, but I was trying to be very esoteric with to see.
Look, man. Don't use big words. Don't talk down to me. I know what whatever that word is that you said. I know what that means. No. So I was gonna avoid this subject, but you and I spoke a couple weeks ago about who the real customer is, who's the customer for teachers, and and a thought just kind of occurred to me, because what you said was that it was. Well, you said it was either students or families, and I can't remember which one you
Well,
said, because it was
I think,
it was a few weeks ago.
yeah,
but-
I'm trying to remember how I said it. I think I said something along the lines of, it's not just the students, right? It's the families and it's the community more broadly, because the parents or whoever's taking care of the kids, who cares about their education, or more broadly, I think we have to think about, and we don't always do a good job of this in education. We have to think about who's paying the bills for the school to run, and that's
Sure.
the community more broadly. So I think the way I
Okay.
said it's not just the students, but we have to think about the families and the community as our kind of clients or customers in education too. And then I think that's you added a temporal dimension to that, right?
Well, I think what I said at the time is that my role as a parent isn't to make my kid a good kid. My role as a parent is to make sure that I'm making my kid into a good adult, because that's really my responsibility. And if I'm looking at nursing school, or a nursing instructor looking at a nursing student, my responsibility, my customer, isn't the student. My customer isn't that student's family. My customer isn't, broadly speaking, society, although that kind of gets a little bit more into the philosophy, I think, behind a lot of nursing instructors. My customer, the person that I'm responsible for, or that I'm taking responsibility for, is the future nurse that resides in that nursing student. And I want to make sure that I'm doing the best that I can to make sure that they're set up for success. The one caveat, or the one thing that I think is contradictory to that, and I've talked about it, with other guests, and other nurses, and both in the podcast and in my professional life, is how little the NCLEX seems to reflect that, because the NCLEX will ask questions about things that are completely off topic, or not off topic, but just, like, nobody knows this stuff. Nobody knows this stuff. And that's, it's designed that way, but it's not a practical test of your knowledge. I think it's much like many of the answer choices that you get in nursing style questions, or NCLEX style questions. They're distractors, to make you think that you've got to know all this kind of stuff. And really, again, we're trying to make, a nursing instructor is trying to make a novice generalist. So, do you know what a blood pH should be? Do you understand that if potassium is a normal potassium level in people is 3.5 to 5.0, is a 5.1 really hyperkalemic? And the answer is no. That's real. That's, you should know that, and you shouldn't get distracted when it says, okay, well, this guy's got a 5.1 potassium and this guy has a hot dog stuck in his throat. Which one are you going to go take care of first? And so, like, I like that discussion, and but who do you hear from? So from the teacher's perspective, like, who do you listen to? Are you listening to the students? Again, from the teacher's perspective, are you listening to the students when they're coming up and they're having issues? Are you listening to the families? Are you trying to kind of balance this, global mindset of who the customer is for who you are as a teacher?
I think in the planning sense, right, is where a lot of that has to come in, because it affects kind of how you approach and think about your role and how you're going to teach your class. So for me, because like you said, I think that is an important piece. It's the future version of the student. I like that idea, is really your client. But that can't be reaction in the moment. That has to be deliberate in your planning on how you're going to run your class. And
Okay.
I think we probably have all had teachers who, we didn't love them on an individual level because maybe they were really strict and they had lots of rules and they gave us lots of work. And I know I certainly had.
Those are the ones who get the low rate my professor grades.
Right. And and then when I look back on that as an adult who now is a teacher, and I think actually I learned the most from those classes that were well structured because they were focused on future me. Right? Mm-hmm. In the moment. And it's like going to the gym, right? Like most people don't love getting up and going and doing the running and the lifting and all the stuff you need to do to get your body in shape. But you do it because you like the future results, right? And so
fair.
I think it has to be at a planning level. You have to have a preemptive sort of sense of that's your goal, and the way you structure and run your class and frankly, what you choose to cover in your class is all going to be tied to that idea. And, from the family perspective, I look at it more as if and this could be totally wrong or you can disagree, but if I set that student up to have some success with this information, with this field, whatever it is I'm teaching in the future, that is doing my duty to that family, and that is doing my duty to the broader community that's paying for all this, because that person is more likely to be better educated and successful and functional when they become an adult,
and they might have to work beside you.
Yeah, I think you can. That's always a good way to think about it. In 10 years, if this person comes back and is working with me, is this going to be a person I want to work with? So it goes into the planning, and the alternative to that, I think, would be if you're responding to just the students in the moment. The other day I had to explain to them, no, we're not going to watch the new Harry Styles music video in history class because that has nothing to do with history, and you can do that on your own time. And they said, oh, but they give you all the excuses that kids give you. And, at the end of the day, it's like, well, no, it's a trade-off, and my trade-off is we're going to learn about this history stuff because that's what we're doing right now. And it's not what you want to do. You want to watch the Harry Styles video, but you can do that later. I don't
know who that is.
He's used to be in One Direction. He's now got his solo career. Apparently, he's a very, very handsome fellow. The ladies all like him. Some guys too, probably, right? But they all.
I don't judge.
Yeah,
don't judge.
He's a good-looking guy. Sings well, but I don't know. I've heard like young Mick Jagger or something. I don't know. Maybe. I don't see it totally.
Oof.
Anyway, I never thought Mick Jagger was that cute though. So now I'm far afield. But that's my point is that there are a lot of teachers, and I get it. I understand how they end up in this spot where they want to be fun and engaging and cool in the moment with the kids. You don't want to be the fuddy-duddy. And I think that does a disservice to future kids, right?
Sure.
And it's hard.
So I don't think we fully encircled our arms around the problems of teaching and being a student, but I hope that we got a little value out of this, at least seeing things from a different perspective, if nothing else, and how to survive or at least think about problems, while we're all kind of facing, both from a teacher and from a student perspective. So thanks so much, Steve. I'll probably see you around the neighborhood, okay?
All right, sounds good.
All right, see ya.
Bye.
Are you tired of the same old badge reel? Do you have to wear the same scrub color as everyone else? Are your undershirts boring and kinda stinky after wearing your lucky shirt through 5 in a row 12s? You can wear your personality in other ways. Go to badgeladybynerdwear.com and check out her massive selection. Tell her you're a Real Talk School of Nursing podcast listener and use the promo code REALTALK20 at checkout for 20% off your order. Expect 2 to 3 weeks for custom orders and a few days depending on her actual job schedule, because she's a real nurse, to get your badges made and shipped. I know you'll treat her like your best friend at clinicals, so go to badgeladybynerdwear.com and order the coolest custom and original badge reels out there. Go to badgeladybynerdwear.com and use the promo code REALTALK20 for 20% off your order. That's badgeladybynerdwear.com and use the promo code REALTALK20 for 20% off your order.
This Real Talk School of Nursing podcast is a Real Talk production. This podcast is dedicated to our brothers and sisters on the front lines of this COVID-19 situation.
Sic Semper Tyrannis, Facta non verba.
Good night, Steve Cannon. Wherever you are. Annyeong kasayo. Now you go home. Thanks for listening. You can support the show directly on our Patreon account at www.patreon.com/realtalknursing and gain benefits such as early content, shoutouts, and special swag. Write into the show at realtalknursing@gmail.com or use Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at realtalknursing. Thank you for supporting our friends, affiliates, and sponsors and following us all on social media. More listeners, likes, and followers means more and better shows. Make sure to share the episode with classmates and give a hand up to those who are coming behind us. Don't forget to reach out and tell us if you have any announcements or special shoutouts to friends, classmates, or colleagues. If you like the show, the Real Talk School of Nursing podcast is available everywhere, so go to wherever you download podcasts, subscribe, rate us, review us, write into the show, and smash that subscribe button. Remember to leave only 5-star reviews because that's the only ratings that count to get us noticed by more nursing students. We want you to be part of this crazy nursing school journey. The Real Talk School of Nursing podcast is a holy moly, I can't believe you're still listening to this podcast.